Okay, anyway, so a little bit about me. I basically made a career of supporting really, really brilliant people in bringing their ideas to life. I started doing that in Beijing, and then I did that in London, Toronto, and then more recently in Silicon Valley. And the reason why I ended up here was I realized that all the work I was doing with these different startups, actually there was a job out there to do that at scale, and that was venture capital, while making money, which was also a great thing. And so that's why I ended up in venture capital. I know I'm under the age of 40. I know I'm a woman, so it must be really weird seeing me up here, but I promise you, I do work in VC. And so I'm hoping to give you a bit of perspective into what we do at Comet, what we're seeing when it comes to AI, applications of AI. I hope it's going to be a bit more optimistic. I mean, I think the presentations today were incredible. I'm feeling a little bit of a sense of like impending doom, so hopefully I can inspire you a little bit in terms of some of the really exciting applications of AI that we're seeing at Comet. Great. So I've got 10 minutes, so I want to quickly tell you about Comet, talk a little bit about hype, because obviously in the investment community we're seeing a lot of money being thrown at things that aren't AI, aren't even machine learning, actually. Also talk a bit about whether traditional VC is actually the best way to support AI startups. We have a lot of thoughts about that at Comet. What we think AI startups actually need to succeed. And then I actually want to open up our books a little bit and tell you a bit about our due diligence process. Maybe just so I know, how many of you are founders or potential founders? Just raise of hands. Great. How many of you are at a large company but potentially hoping to quit your job and start something? Great. Awesome. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. Great. So we're 2 years old. We focus exclusively on AI enabling tech and applications of AI. So basically the way that we think about it is you think about the computer and then the internet that followed as an application, the mobile phone and then applications like Candy Crush and everything else you have on your phone. What we're seeing right now is the advent of infrastructure when it comes to AI and robotics. But there is going to be this whole wave of applications that's actually started already. And so we're investing in both the underlying infrastructure, so if you think about the computer or the phone, and also in the companies that are building on top of that. We're actually the most active early stage investor in the B2B AI and robotics space. So if you're building something that is not consumer facing, definitely come and talk to me. We're very active and would love to hear what you're working on. I'll tell you a bit about why we actually have built a fund and a labs. We're called Comet Labs. We're not called Comet Capital or Comet Ventures. I'll explain to you why, and that actually has a lot to do with the fact that AI companies, as I'm sure a lot of you know, don't just need capital. A lot of them can go to any investors today and raise $10 million Series A. What do these startups actually need? And that's why we've actually built labs. Also, we're actually focused both in China and in the US. I graduated both from Cambridge and MIT, but also Tsinghua and Beida. Most of us speak Chinese and English on the team. As some of you may know, deep learning research has actually overtaken the US and China recently. We think that AI is definitely global, and we have to be aware of what's going on in China, so that's what we do. Also, the slide before had logos of all the VCs who've gone and invested in some of our portfolio companies, which is a good sign in terms of our own track record. So as you all know, that's why you're here. AI revolution is here despite all the hype. So there's been a lot of discussion of, is this space overhyped? Is AI not really real? I think we all agree that that's not the case, but there are some issues with the media and the sort of generalist investment community that is making it seem like it's all a bit of rocket science, not data science, and there's some education there. But in terms of what I was talking about, we've had these sort of waves of disruption, infrastructure followed by applications, and that's very much what we're focused on at Comet. So one of the things that we found, as I alluded to earlier, is that traditional investment methods don't actually work for AI startups. This is our hypothesis. I hope I'm not offending anyone in the process. But basically, money, you can get it as an AI startup. What you can't get is some of these insights from customers, from industry, that are going to enable you to build a great company and product. And so what we are doing in-house is actually giving access to better product development tools and customer development tools. I was talking with someone before this panel about what they wanted to hear about. I wasn't sure what you wanted to hear about in terms of VC perspective. There's a lot of tools out there, Google Cloud, AWS, that are helping companies build applications more quickly than ever. I mean, you get storage, you get computational power, you get APIs to clean your data, label it. There's so many tools out there. But a lot of what's very hard to get is sort of more tools that allow you to build something that's useful and actually scale up from there. So what do AI startups actually need? And I'm happy to hear from you guys if I've left something off here. There's obviously money, but again, money left aside, that's the easy part. What are the other things? There's data, proof of concepts and pilots, understanding of use cases, and talent. And so what we do in our labs, at Comet Labs, is actually give startups access to all of these things. And we work really hard to do that. So we actually go and convince corporations to open up non-critical data sets to their business. We go and work with nonprofits, government, to open up a lot of data that would be helpful to the startups we work with. We also work with the same customers and institutions to convince them to run pilots with the portfolio companies that we have, but also the other startups we work with in the broader ecosystem. Sort of related to pilots and proof of concepts, at an earlier stage is even understanding whether you're working on the right thing. The number of startups we've had pitch us that are solving a problem that doesn't exist is unbelievable. And in the same way, we've got Fortune 500 companies, but also other companies that have a lot of problems that could use AI and machine learning that they don't have the ability to build in-house because they can't hire the best data scientists and they don't have solutions. So sort of bringing those things together is definitely a focus of ours. We also work with a lot of universities to scout the best data scientists and roboticists to actually help our startups hire. And so we feel like with all of these things alongside the capital that we provide, this is what's actually going to help companies succeed and grow. Now I'd like to sort of shift gear and talk a bit about our due diligence process. I hope this is helpful. It's basically opening our books for the first time, actually. I tried to set up here all of the questions that we ask entrepreneurs when they come and pitch us. And you can see that there's a lot of different types of questions, but they're different to what we would ask a software company, for VCs who've been in the industry longer. So how are you obtaining your data is a big one, and also to start. Are you generating or negotiating access to this data is also a big one. If someone else can just go and get access to this same data set, what's really going to sort of give you that edge in the long term? If you're generating proprietary data sets, what makes this valuable and why is it hard to obtain? Maybe if you're negotiating access to proprietary data sets, how did you negotiate that access? Are you giving something to that customer or that corporation in return for access to this data? Another big one is product. So a lot of people in the AI investment community right now are talking about a product problem when it comes to AI. I'm sure a lot of you, I think it was mentioned earlier, have sat and done Andrew Ng's Coursera course, the amazing machine learning course. I actually have had to stop because it's getting a bit too hard for me without a technical background. But the general sense is that anyone can learn how to do linear regression, can learn how to do this. Debugging is extremely hard, but if you put enough time and effort into it, you can learn data science. Can you learn how to build a product on top of data science? Can you really do it? Can you build something valuable? It is another question. And so there was this panel actually recently talking about how AI startups are going to fail for the same reasons as software startups did, in that they have to build a product that's actually valuable. So here are some of the questions that we ask. Talk us through the actual stack. Which part of the stack is hardest to replicate and why? So this could be sort of further down the stack, higher up. What's your technical secret sauce? It's always hard to get out of startups before we invest in them, but usually if they give us insights, that's sort of what allows us to decide that it's a good bet. Which parts did you build and which parts are off the shelf? We actually love startups that use as many parts off the shelf as possible. It means that their solution is scalable, it's not too expensive. Also, which libraries did you use? ImageNet, internet, other types of data sets, and then how much of a human is in the loop today. If you're building a chatbot, if you're doing, neural net building for other companies, like how much of it is being sent off to India and then, to train a model, and that's totally fine in the early days, but we just want to understand how much human beings in India or elsewhere in the world are in the loop, and when you're planning on actually creating a model on top of that. We also talk a lot to your customers, so having those set up is really important to us. So now a bit about team. Team matters a lot. We invest pre-seed seed, so what we're investing in is your ability to figure it out. That is honestly the only thing where, data, product for sure matters, but we want to know that even if, the industry that you're focused on fundamentally changes tomorrow, or, something happens, that you're going to be able to pivot or refocus and just make this happen as a team together. On top of that, we do like to see a technical founder. If you don't have anyone who knows anything about data science or robotics, that's going to be a problem for us, just because we're not sure that you're going to be able to build and scale. One of the big questions we also ask is, who's your first hire after we give you money? Are you planning on growing your engineering team? Are you going to do BD? We want to get insights into what you think your own roadmap is. And then why are you the best team to work on this specific problem? And that actually leads me to the next one, which has to do with market. Is there someone on your team who understands the market that you're going after in a tangible way? If you're building something for the retail industry, did someone at least sell something in retail at some point in your life? That would probably be a good indicator, even if you're just working, sort of as a cashier in a retail setting. But yes, to go through some of these, what do you understand about the industry that potentially others don't, or that others do, but you're potentially a bit ahead? I really like this question because, there's definitely building for industry, but there's also completely taking the industry from left field and blindsiding them. And that's, if you could rethink the industry from first principles, how would you do it? So the insurance industry is set up in the way that it is today, but if you could sort of go back in time a little bit, rebuild it, and use the tools that you have at your disposal today to do something totally different, how would you do it? How are you going to fundamentally disrupt this space? Addressable markets, some more sort of obvious questions around competitors, sales cycle, recurring revenue. We want to make sure that you're going to make some money, even though, sort of there's a whole part of the industry that's okay with funding things that don't make money. We want to have a sense of you being able to stand on your 2 feet, if at all possible. Who are your biggest customers, and how have you been acquiring them so far? And that sort of loops back into data that I talked about at the beginning. So that's sort of it for me. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, especially because there are so many founders, potential people leaving their companies to start something. I hope this was helpful, and yeah, please go ahead and start asking. Sorry, I can't see very well. Anybody? No questions? Yeah?
So, this is my side on producing this conference, but Courtney does most of the work. But I have a software startup, and it's interesting, VC and CDB focused on sort of the same things. Don't you think that the data is just going to be completely commoditized and simply where it all seems to be going? Focused on data.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, just to repeat, is data going to become commoditized, is the question, right?
Yeah, I'll just give you a little bit more background. When we started 5 years ago, we grew the company got sued by LinkedIn, the Wilcox, calling the shit out of LinkedIn. So we know a lot about going after data, and then we went the other way and locked it in and got a ton of Facebook data. But what we see in the market is they're pretty much moving to downloading a lot today, 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. So, yeah, I mean, the second part was more context. Did you want to get the context as well? Sold a company, sort of data was commoditized.
We just see it commoditizing.
yeah, we're seeing being commoditized. Yeah, so we're definitely seeing a lot of initiatives, data.org, a lot of even bigger guys. I was talking to someone from Cisco earlier who's talking about potentially opening up data sets around smart cities. Definitely we're seeing a huge movement towards opening up of data, and so sort of leading to commoditization in the future. I see that as a very powerful and positive thing. Once, I don't know how many of you saw Fei-Fei Li's presentation at Google I/O, I think it was, or it was earlier, at the cloud conference. She talked about democratizing algorithms, data, and computational power. And so I think a lot of these big tech companies and other institutions out there are very much thinking about how do you sort of open up all of this, all while making a lot of money on the back end, for sure. But we're going to live in a world where you have the tools, the computational power, everything you need, and the data. It's going to be more about building a product out of it. I think you're right. Right now there is still this edge on, can you collect a data set that doesn't exist yet? Like our investment hypothesis in the early days was actually investing in a lot of hardware companies, because a lot of industries out there are not digitized at all. Agriculture, construction, even parts of the insurance claims processing, that process isn't even digitized. So right now, I think in the short term, there is still value in collecting that data and having companies work with that data. But in the future, it is going to be much more open. But for the better, it's going to be more about less convincing people to give you access to data, more about building amazing tools that are going to help eventually make the world a better place. I didn't talk so much about this, and this is definitely not answering the question anymore, but a lot of the companies we invested in are set to be able to enable us to feed 9 billion people in 2050, right? So we've got all these challenges. There's cancer. There's, the number of people who are going to live on this planet in a couple of decades. Most of the companies we invest in are going to enable us to actually solve those problems. And so as easier it can get to allow those companies to actually build those solutions, the better. I definitely think it is, and I think the broader community and ecosystem think it is too. Yeah. Any other questions? Sure.
Who eventually subsumes these cottage industry size AI companies? Does it go to bigger branches like Google or Facebook, or?
Yeah.
I would think that the nature of AI is to be self-sustaining in the fact that it's low overhead and pretty much just a large server.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is how many of these companies are actually setting themselves up to be acquired. And I think honestly, if you're a smart person and know a bit about AI, I would probably do that. If you know you're going to be able to raise a $10, $60 million Series A and then get acquired sort of right after then why not, right? But I think it's a good question, sort of where is all this technology going to end up? Also, who is going to acquire them? And then also, who's going to IPO? A lot of people think that Mobileye should have just stayed private and IPO'd. There's not many companies we're seeing sort of stick it out until the end. To your specific question, I think it really depends. In agriculture, for instance, and this is something that saddens me a little bit, most of the companies are getting acquired by the Bayers, the Monsantos, the sort of in my mind, no offense again, big evil sort of ag players. And so it's actually stopping innovation. A lot of these Syngentas, all of those are buying technology and then either sort of throwing it to the side so that they don't get disrupted, or employing those tools to actually make even more. And so actually, if those technologies were acquired potentially even by technology companies, and then servicing those tools to farmers, to people who are in the industry who don't have as much leverage, that in my mind would be extremely powerful. And you're seeing a lot of big companies that are starting to make advances in different industries. I mean, Google X is basically in every industry right now. Amazon is starting to look into different industries as well. There's definitely a shift of power between the old big corps, and then now the tech companies are starting to get some leverage. But I'm also definitely very optimistic of sort of from the ground up, these smaller companies emerging. Think companies like Lemonade, who in a big old industry like insurance, you would have never thought that a tech company could do so well, and yet it's possible that they may actually sort of come out on top in some way. Any last questions?
What are the biggest areas of growth in the business that you're seeing AI applied to right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you a bit about some of my favorites, because I mean, we look at every single industry from agriculture, construction, retail, sort of you name it. One of the most interesting ones for me is actually applying machine learning to microbiome research. So when you look at agriculture, you know, cattle and seeds and plants, but also, you know, at like healing human bodies, there's a lot of research now being done around the development of healthy bacteria with machine learning to stop using antibiotics and pesticides. And you know, I'm a very idealistic, sort of optimistic person. I think AI is going to give us some tools to actually become less chemical in a way. You know, to use powerful math and data science to give us insights into natural sort of processes to allow us to solve systems without creating artificial chemical substitutes for that, if that makes sense. So that's been, you know, Illumina is investing in a lot of startups in that space. I think they're doing amazing work. It's something we've been looking into as well. I hope that answers it. It's definitely one that I'm very excited to see more come out of, for sure. Yeah. Any finals? Do I still have time? I'm not sure. No? Okay, well, thanks so much.